I knew something was different the night he punched the guy the first was flirting with. It sounds like a cliche, I know, but when your best friend of 10 years, who's straight mind you, suddenly throws a punch at some random guy in a bar, all while your jaw is still hanging open from the fact that said guy was actually interested in you, well, it tends to stick in your memory. It started out like any other Friday. Me, Chris, and a couple of our friends from college were grabbing drinks at this dive bar near downtown. It was loud, packed, and smelled faintly like sweat and fryer grease, but it was our usual spot. We'd been coming here since sophomore year, and not much had changed. Chris was the same as always, loud, cocky, impossibly good-looking in that way that made girls laugh at his stupidest jokes, and guys either want to fight him or be him. 6'2", blonde, lean but built, like someone had clicked default hot guy in a video game and just left it there. And me? Well, I was the quieter one, the best friend. The guy who helped him write his English papers kept snacks stocked in the apartment and pretended not to care when he brought home girl after girl. Except I did care, quietly, secretly, painfully. We'd lived together for almost a year now. Chris had broken up with his ex and crashed in my spare room temporarily, which, in Chris terms, meant indefinitely. And despite the occasional annoyance, like him never doing his dishes or leaving his gym socks on the coffee table, it was fine, easy even. Except for the part where I was completely, stupidly in love with him. Anyway, back to the bar. Chris had been nursing a whiskey and teasing me for eye-humping some guy across the room. His words, not mine. I rolled my eyes, told him to go flirt with the waitress again, and then, emboldened by my third beer, I actually went over and talked to the guy. His name was Ryan. He was a grad student visiting from out of town. Charming, handsome, totally my type. We were mid-flirt, laughing about something dumb. When it happened, Chris just appeared, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He didn't say a word, just shoved his way between us, muttered something to Ryan, and then, without warning, punched him. It wasn't a full-on brawl. Security stepped in before it could escalate, and Ryan, to his credit, just backed off, muttering something about psychos as he left. I stood there frozen, still holding my half-finished drink, trying to understand what the hell had just happened. Back outside in the cold, I finally found my voice. "What the hell was that, Chris?" He didn't look at me, just stared at the sidewalk, breathing hard. I didn't like him. That's not an answer. Silence. He shoved his hands in his jacket pockets. "He was touching you," he muttered finally. I didn't like it. I stared at him. "Chris, that's kind of the point." More silence. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it. That flicker, that thing I hadn't dared let myself believe could be real. "I know," he said quietly. "That's the problem." I should have said something right then, asked him what the hell he meant, pressed him, pushed, but instead, I just stood there like an idiot, letting the wind chill bite into my skin while Chris looked everywhere except at me. "That's the problem?" I repeated slowly. "That I was into him?" Chris shook his head but didn't say anything. He started walking, hands still jammed into his jacket pockets like he was trying to keep himself from doing something worse. I had no choice but to follow. We walked all the way back to the apartment in silence. 5 blocks. The air between us was tight, humming. I kept replaying it all in my head. His face, the punch, the look he gave me right after, like he was just as confused as I was. Maybe more. When we got inside, I tossed my keys onto the counter and finally turned to him. "Chris, you can't just go around punching people because you don't like who I'm talking to. That's insane." "I wasn't thinking," he muttered, peeling off his jacket. "It just happened." "No, it didn't just happen. You did it. You saw me talking to a guy and lost it." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he ran a hand through his hair and dropped onto the couch, rubbing his face with both hands like he was trying to scrub off the entire night. "I don't get it," I said, voice quieter now. "You're not into guys. You've made that pretty clear." Chris looked up at me, something unreadable in his eyes. "I thought I wasn't." That sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and awkward. I thought I wasn't, he said again, softer this time. But then it's you. And Ryan. And I saw the way you looked at him. I don't know what came over me. I hated it. I didn't know what to say to that. I sat down on the edge of the armchair, heart thumping like a bass drum in my chest. You've had, like, 100 girlfriends, I said. I've seen you make out with girls literally 5 feet from me on that couch. Chris winced. Yeah, I know. I'm not saying I've suddenly figured it all out. I'm not claiming to be anything. When it's you, it feels different. I notice everything. I stared at him. Chris. I know, he said quickly, cutting me off. You probably think I'm full of shit. I don't blame you. But I meant what I said. Seeing that guy with you made me feel sick. And what does that mean? He leaned back, eyes closed like he was bracing for impact. I think I'm into you, man. I don't know when it started, but I can't stop thinking about you. And tonight, it just confirmed it. I blinked. You think? He groaned. Okay, fine. I know. I've known for weeks. Maybe longer. I just didn't want to admit it. I figured I'd screw everything up if I did. And punching Ryan was your way of easing into it? Chris gave a crooked, sheepish smile. I said I didn't have a plan. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It burst out of me before I could stop it. I cannot believe this is real, I said. You, Chris fucking Patterson, the straightest guy I've ever met. Chris's face softened. Maybe not as straight as I thought. We sat there for a long time, just watching each other. The quiet between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was thick, charged. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing, he said finally. I don't. But if there's even a chance you feel the same way. I didn't let him finish. I stood, walked over to the couch, and sat down next to him. And then I kissed him. It wasn't a long kiss. Not at first. Just a tentative press of lips. Soft, slow, careful. Like both of us were scared that the other might pull away, but neither of us did. Chris's hand landed on my knee, hesitant but firm. My own hand drifted up to the side of his face, feeling the faint stubble along his jaw. When I pulled back, barely an inch, he followed. Eyes closed, lips parted, breathing just a little faster than before. You okay? I asked quietly. He nodded. Yeah, just trying not to freak out. I almost laughed. You just kissed a guy. I know, he said, cracking a shaky smile. And it wasn't bad. Not bad? Okay, it was good, he admitted, eyes still on me. Really good. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of what just happened settle around us. The TV was still playing some muted sports rerun in the background, but I couldn't have told you what. The room felt completely different now, like a line had been crossed, and nothing was going to be the same after this. You meant it, right? I asked finally. What you said. About being into me? Chris looked down, then back at me. Yeah, I didn't want to. Believe me, I fought it. Told myself I was just feeling lonely or jealous or whatever. But I've never felt like this around anyone else. Not even my ex. That part surprised me. I raised an eyebrow. You're telling me I beat Katie? You guys were together for, like, a year. He snorted. Katie was great. But it was easy. Simple. No fireworks. And me? He leaned in again, this time brushing his lips against mine deliberately, slower than before. You're the fucking finale on the 4th of July. I blushed so hard I had to look away. But the warmth stayed. It settled into my chest, wrapped around my ribs, thudded behind my heart. Chris shifted on the couch, turning to face me fully. I don't know what this means, he said. I don't know what happens next. But I want to figure it out. With you. I studied him for a moment. My best friend. The guy I had secretly loved for longer than I cared to admit. The same guy who, an hour ago, had been a straight, beer-drinking, girl-dating cliché. Now sitting here on my couch, asking to figure himself out with me. And the thing is, I believed him. "You sure?" I asked. "Because once we start this, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," he said. "I want whatever this is." I smiled. "Then let's find out." Chris exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for days. He leaned in again, and this time the kiss deepened. Less hesitant, more certain. His hand found the back of my neck. Mine slipped under the hem of his shirt without thinking. His skin was warm, familiar, and somehow entirely new. We didn't sleep together that night. I know, that's not the kind of twist people expect after two best friends finally kiss. But that's not how it went. We stayed up talking. For hours, it was like a pressure valve had been released, and suddenly everything we'd kept bottled up came spilling out. Chris told me things I never imagined I'd hear from him, how he'd started noticing me differently sometime last spring, but chalked it up to being weirdly clingy. How he hated the guys I dated, not because they were bad dudes, but because they weren't him, and how he spent half our summer road trip trying not to stare at me in hotel beds. I couldn't stop smiling. Not because I was trying to be cool, but because I physically couldn't stop. My face hurt. He kept saying things I'd dreamed about hearing. And there he was, right across from me, feet tucked under the blanket, eyes tired but open in that way they never were with anyone else. At one point, somewhere around 3 a.m., I got up to grab water. When I came back, Chris had curled up on the couch and patted the cushion next to him. I hesitated. "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, I don't want to sleep in my room tonight." So I slipped under the blanket next to him. It was a tight fit, and our legs ended up tangled without much effort. He smelled like fabric softener and whiskey. I rested my head against the back of the couch, and after a few minutes, he shifted and let his hand fall onto my chest. Light, steady, that's how we fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the windows and the sound of Chris softly snoring beside me. I didn't move. Didn't want to. His arm was still draped over me like it had been there for years. When he finally stirred, blinking sleep from his eyes, he looked at me like he was still processing the night before. "You still here?" he asked groggily. "Yeah," I said. "Where else would I go?" He smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't his cocky frat boy grin. It was quiet. Real. We didn't say much that morning. I made coffee, he made eggs. We sat at the table in our usual seats, but everything was different. Better. Around noon, we went grocery shopping because we were out of milk, and also, I think we needed something normal to anchor us. But even there, in the dairy aisle, he reached for the same carton I did and let his hand brush mine. Not by accident. Later, back at the apartment, he stood in the doorway of the kitchen and said, "So, what are we?" I put down the box of cereal I'd been holding. "What do you want us to be?" Chris stepped forward, close now. His fingers found mine. We were standing next to the fridge, surrounded by bags of groceries and the hum of the compressor kicking on. But it might as well have been a movie set. "I want us to try this," he said, "for real, you and me." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Okay," I said, "let's try." And then he kissed me again. Right there, between the fridge and the pantry, with the afternoon light hitting his jaw just right, and my heart somewhere up in my throat. The next few days were surreal. It was like living in some kind of slow burn dream, where everything felt both too good to be true and shockingly natural at the same time. We didn't tell anyone, not yet. It felt too new, too fragile to put into words for other people. But inside our apartment, something had shifted. The space between us, once filled with jokes and casual insults and lazy roommate routines, now buzzed with something deeper. Something intimate. Chris was different, but not in a bad way. He still watched football way too loudly and left wet towels on the bathroom floor. But now he also reached for my hand while we watched TV. Now he leaned against me when we sat on the couch, shoulder pressing into mine like he needed to be close. And at night, when we both crawled into our separate rooms, he'd pause in the doorway, like he was thinking about asking to sleep in my bed again. Sometimes he did. Other times we just stood there in the hallway, not saying anything, and he'd smile, squeeze my arm, and go to bed. It was quiet, soft, real. Then Saturday night came. We were invited to our friend Drew's housewarming party. Drew didn't know anything about us. None of our friends did. We debated whether to go, but Chris said he wanted to, said he didn't want to hide, even if we weren't ready to make a whole announcement. I could tell he was nervous though. Hell, I was too. The party was packed. Beer, music, laughter. The usual crowd from college, plus some unfamiliar faces. Chris drifted off to talk to a couple of guys from his old soccer team. I stuck by the kitchen, sipping a White Claw and making awkward small talk with a girl who worked in marketing and loved true crime podcasts. That's when I saw it. Across the room, Chris was talking to some girl. She was tall, brunette, ridiculously hot. The kind of girl that used to cling to him at every party. And she was laughing hard at something he said. She touched his arm, and he didn't pull away. My stomach twisted. I turned back toward the counter and pretended I hadn't seen it. But the next time I looked up, she was even closer. Chris was leaning in, his voice low in her ear, and I felt something ugly crawl up my throat. Jealousy, sharp, immediate. I left the kitchen, walked straight to the balcony, pushed open the door, and stepped into the night air. The music faded behind me, replaced by the sound of distant traffic and the buzz of a neon sign across the street. I leaned against the railing, trying to slow my breathing. He hadn't done anything wrong, I knew that. But it still felt like something had cracked open in my chest. "You okay?" a voice said behind me. "Chris." I didn't turn around. "Yeah," he came up beside me. "You sure?" "You look busy in there," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Chris frowned. "What do you mean?" "That girl. The one who looked like she was about to climb you like a tree." He blinked, then groaned. "Oh, her. She was trying to get me to help her move a couch. I told her I was with someone." I looked at him. "You did?" He nodded, slipping a hand around my waist. "Yeah. She was hitting on me, and I said no, because I'm with you." I swallowed. "Even though we haven't told anyone?" "I don't care," he said. "You think I give a shit about what anyone else thinks? I've been pretending for years. I'm done with that." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I exhaled. Then, right there on the balcony, Chris kissed me. Not soft, not tentative, but like he meant it. Like he wanted everyone inside to see. And they did. When we went back inside, I saw Drew's eyebrows shoot up, saw two girls whispering in the corner, saw someone nudge his friend and gesture toward us. Chris didn't flinch. He just grabbed my hand and held it, steady and sure, and kept walking. The ride home was quiet, but not in a bad way. Chris drove with one hand on the wheel, and the other resting casually on my thigh. I stared out the window, watching the lights blur past, still not quite believing the way he'd kissed me in front of everyone like that. Bold. Unapologetic. He didn't say much on the drive. He didn't have to. When we got back to the apartment, he tossed his keys in the bowl by the door and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. You?" "Little nervous about the fallout," he admitted, "but no regrets." I didn't expect him to follow that up with anything else, but he did. I spent years caring too much about what people thought of me. I'm done with that. I don't want to be the guy who hides the best part of his life. I stared at him. "You think I'm the best part of your life?" Chris looked down, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to laugh or kiss me again. Instead, he stepped forward and pulled me into him. "Yeah," he said, voice low against my neck. "I do." We stood there like that for a while, just holding each other. No rush, no pressure. Eventually, he stepped back and looked at me, expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" "You don't have to ask anymore," I said. We brushed our teeth side by side like we had 100 times before, but this time felt different. There was a familiarity, sure, but also an undercurrent of something new. Intimate. His bare shoulder bumped mine while he spit. He grinned at me through the mirror. I couldn't stop smiling either. In bed, we didn't talk much, just curled into each other, warm and quiet. But just before sleep pulled us under, Chris spoke. "I keep thinking about all the times I could have kissed you before this." I turned toward him in the dark. "Yeah? I almost did on your birthday, when you made that dumb joke about being single forever." I laughed. "I remember, you said I was too picky." He grinned. "I was jealous of anyone who could have had you." My chest tightened in the best way. "You've got me now," I whispered. He pulled me closer. "I know." The next morning, I woke up before him. Sunlight slanted across the bed, and Chris was still dead asleep. His arm flopped over my waist like he belonged there. I stayed still, not wanting to move, not wanting to break whatever spell we were under. Because the truth was, I had spent years imagining what this might be like. Now I didn't have to imagine anymore. That morning felt like something out of someone else's life. Chris eventually stirred, groaning into the pillow like a teenager avoiding school. When he finally blinked at me, through messy hair and morning breath, he smiled like he hadn't just had the most emotionally seismic week of his life. "Mornin'," he said, voice gravelly. "Morning," I replied, already smiling. He stretched, arms over his head, shirt riding up just enough to be distracting, and then flopped back down dramatically. "Do we have to get up?" "No," I said, "but we should." "Boo!" he mumbled into the pillow. We stayed in bed for another half hour, trading lazy kisses and terrible jokes. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to hide a single part of myself. Later that day, while we were folding laundry, Chris glanced at me and asked, "Should we tell them?" "Tell who?" He gave me a look. "You know who." "Ah, the friends, the group chat, the people who had seen Chris go through a parade of flings and girlfriends, and who had seen me, well, crush quietly on every guy who wasn't him." I hesitated. "Only if you're sure." "I'm sure," he said. "I think I've always been sure, just didn't realize it." So we did. One by one. The reactions were mixed. Mostly positive, a few stunned, one very predictable, "Wait, what the?" from Drew. But the support came in, slow but solid. Later that evening, we ended up on the couch, scrolling through old photos on Chris's phone. Mostly blurry group shots and gym selfies. He stopped on one I hadn't seen before. Me, asleep on the couch in a hoodie, mouth slightly open. He'd taken it last winter. "Why do you have this?" Chris grinned. "I used to look at it when I thought you'd never look at me the way I looked at you." I blinked. "Chris, I've been in love with you since junior year." He just smiled wider. "I know, I was an idiot." He leaned over and kissed me. Not rushed, not heavy, just enough to let me know he was exactly where he wanted to be. That night, we shared my bed again, not out of hesitation this time, or confusion, or a need to prove anything, just because we wanted to. And sometime around midnight, after the kisses turned slower and sleep started tugging at the edges of my thoughts, Chris whispered, "I don't want this to be just a phase. I want to really try." "It's not a phase," I whispered back. "It's us." He smiled, kissed my shoulder, and held me tighter. 3 months later, we hosted a game night. Same apartment, same group of friends, but everything felt different now. Chris sat beside me on the couch, his thigh pressed to mine, his hand resting comfortably on my knee in front of everyone. Nobody made a big deal out of it. There were no gasps, no awkward jokes, just a couple of raised eyebrows and a few knowing smiles. After everyone left and the apartment was quiet again, I stood at the sink rinsing out the last few glasses. Chris came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "Can I tell you something?" he said, voice low against my neck. "Of course." "I didn't think I was capable of this," he said. "Being in love with someone, let alone a guy." I turned to face him. "But you are." He nodded. "Yeah, and it's terrifying. But good?" "The best," he said, smiling. "You're the best thing I've got." I kissed him then, soft and slow, right there in the kitchen with the dishwasher humming and our socks sticking slightly to the tile. The kind of kiss you give someone when you're home, when you've stopped running from yourself. Later, we curled up in bed. My bed. Our bed now, if we were being honest. Chris's stuff had gradually migrated into my room. An extra toothbrush, his charger, that hoodie I always used to steal that now hung on the back of my chair like it belonged there. I watched him sleep that night, his chest rising and falling steadily, his face soft in the dim light from the hallway. He looked so peaceful, so mine. It had taken years of missed signals, late-night doubts, and one very ill-advised punch to get here, but here we were. Chris Patterson, my best friend, the guy who used to bring girls home like it was his part-time job, now curled up in my bed, one arm slung over my waist like he couldn't bear to be anywhere else. I reached over and brushed a piece of hair from his forehead. "Hey," I whispered. He stirred. I love you." His eyes opened just a little. He smiled, half asleep. "Took you long enough," he mumbled. Then he pulled me closer and drifted back to sleep. And for the first time in forever, I did too. With no doubt, no fear, just the warm, steady rhythm of his breath against my neck, and the quiet certainty that this was exactly where we were supposed to be.